Catherine Fiore, EU reporter. We see that Europe over the last, since the refugee crisis and maybe before, has become a much more intolerant place. I was wondering, what can the religious leaders do to say to their followers that they have a duty to welcome refugees fleeing an ultra-violent conflict? In particular, you know, there are some European countries who have said that they want to defend their Christianity. Well, surely part of that is part of their Christian values. So I suppose it's largely speaking to the Christian leaders. Thank you.
Well, thank you for this question. I'm from Germany, and of course this has been a very important question for us in the past year. There have been several 100,000 people in the parishes, in the Christian parishes in Germany, who have gotten involved in a welcome culture for refugees in Germany, and they are continuing to get involved and to try to help to integrate refugees into our society. So this question was very important for us. How can we share the experience with others in Europe? And I think Christian religion has as its core the inseparability between love of God and love of neighbor. Now the Christmas season comes and we celebrate that God became human in a little child, in a vulnerable little child. So in this religion, it is absolutely impossible to pray to God, to celebrate worship service, and not look at your neighbor. Of course, we do experience that there is not a common standpoint in the European churches on this very concrete issue of refugees. But we have organized conferences through the World Council of Churches, but I have also invited a conference to Munich with church leaders from Europe and the Middle East to deal with this question. What does it mean to be Christian in this refugee crisis? And there is a network of communication on this question. And my hope is, and there are examples for progress, that through communication on the Christian basis, we can become a little bit like a salt of the earth in our own countries. There have been statements, and I have been involved in a meeting in Budapest, for example, in Hungary, statements by bishops and church leaders from different countries of Europe that have not simply doubled what their national leaders say. So my hope is, and I had a panel discussion with the Hungarian Minister of Human Resources, who is a reformed minister. And part of the discussion, of course, was, what does Christian Occident mean? What does it mean to have this word, Christ, in our political discussion, when Christ is somebody who has said, I have been a stranger and you have received me? So I think it is not only a problem, it is also a chance. If people who are critical of receiving refugees use the name of Christ, it is also a chance because we can talk about what it means that we speak about Christ. And that is what we do as church leaders. We get engaged in dialogue, and I hope that it will result in a more welcoming culture for refugees in Europe.
Elder Patrick Karen.
You asked what can we do, and our experience over the last 18 months has been to encourage. I'm from the UK. I live in Germany, and have my responsibilities cover all of Europe. So we've been encouraging our church members from 39 countries from the EU and beyond to get close to refugees, to feed them, to clothe them, where appropriate, to provide shelter. And this has provided glorious opportunities for adherents to my own faith, and provided those who've got involved with wonderful opportunities. And they have been blessed as they've helped those who are in such dire need. And this has been a revelation to many, and it's taken down barriers instantly. So we encourage our people to do this, and we continue to do that. And wonderfully, some of our best experiences are when we act in joint ventures with people of other faiths, Muslims, other Christians, Jews, and people of other faith, as well as with governments and with non-governmental organizations. So we get in and help. And that breaks down prejudice, and it brings healing, and it extends a warm welcome, which is a great foundation for integration.
Imam Idris of Penzberg.
Ja, ich bin Zeuge.
Well, I can testify to the Imam that the Christian denominations have done a great deal in terms of integrating refugees in Germany. And I can also say that Christian organizations, people with Christian beliefs perhaps have been more committed to helping refugees than has been the case for Muslims. That's something I've experienced myself. So that means that by way of conclusion, what I can say is that all those in Germany with faith who have relations with churches have ensured that integration of refugees is working. People that don't have any links or access to churches or are not religious, in those areas of the population you find populism is more visible. So in the future, if we have to have successful integration of refugees in Europe, churches, but also mosques need to cooperate more closely so that these shared European values are given focus. This is what strengthens us in Europe, that is common values, tolerance, respect for human value. For some Muslims, for some refugees, these are perhaps rather alien values. So it's particularly important for Muslims to convey these values, but for that to take place, we need cooperation and close cooperation with church organizations.
Noch einmal der Chief Rabbi Folger.
You're asking what can faith communities do and faith leaders do to convey the duty to accept migrants. Please pardon me, I don't mean to insinuate anything against your person, but the approach that we should convey that it is a duty to take in migrants is, in my belief, something that contributes to the present situation we have in Europe, whereby the populations throughout Europe are extremely split about this question and are fighting more and more vehemently against it. I think that instead of conveying a duty, I know if it's about a religious issue, a ritual issue, and I convey a duty to the people of my community, I won't get them all. I need to convince them, not just to say you must. That is exactly, I think, where those who advocate the integration of more refugees have somewhat failed, namely in trying to recruit a broader base of people who are interested, who want to integrate more of those migrants. I'd say religiously, I distinguish between things that are an obligation and things that are good, even very, very good, but that I can't force people to do. I don't think that regarding all migrants we can say it is an absolute black and white duty to take them in. I think it's an act of righteousness, an act of love of people, an act of mutual support, of brotherhood, but I can't say that I can absolutely obligate someone to do that. I think this is a political development that we have to help bring about, and for that purpose, speaking of a duty is perhaps the wrong language to use and the wrong attitude to have. I'm sorry.
On this side.
I last week went to visit the Archbishop of Canterbury, who's my boss, in his home in Lambeth Palace in London, and I'm used to seeing there religious leaders and people dressed in grey suits and so on. As I entered the building, as I was going in, I met a family, a mother and father and two children. They were Syrians. And the Archbishop has invited a Syrian family to come and live in Lambeth Palace in in the grounds of the palace. And I thought that's a very lovely enacted symbol of something in which I treasure in my own faith, the welcome of the stranger. It's not a matter of compelling people, but when senior religious leaders can model that in the way they order their own households, well, that is probably a good thing.